Right now, nearly half of all American adults are living with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, almost half the population walking around with a condition that dramatically increases their risk of dying from any cause, not just from diabetes complications. And that is the part that never seems to come up at the doctor's office. You go in with some symptoms, they tell you what you have. And instead of sitting down and talking about what you can actually change, they hand you a prescription and tell you to come back in 6 months. Here is what most people genuinely do not know. The real problem is not high blood sugar. The real problem is insulin resistance. A condition that has been building quietly in the background for years, sometimes decades, before anyone gets diagnosed. Largely driven by the world we live in now. Ultra-processed foods everywhere, easy access to refined carbs around the clock, lifestyles that push our metabolism into fat storage mode all day, every day. Insulin resistance is connected to almost every major disease that kills us. Heart disease, stroke, kidney failure, dementia, certain cancers. The damage builds up in your heart, your brain, your blood vessels, your kidneys, long before you notice a single symptom. One of the biggest drivers of that damage is repeated large spikes in blood sugar. So today we are going over 20 evidence-based strategies to reduce those spikes, reverse insulin resistance, and lower your risk of type 2 diabetes. Or even reverse it if you have already been diagnosed. If any of this sounds like something you or someone you care about needs to hear, drop a comment below and let us know. It truly helps more than you think. These are not ranked in strict order of importance because different strategies will matter more for different people, but all of them work, and all of them are things you can start doing today. Number 1 is building muscle through resistance training. This is one of the most underrated tools for reversing insulin resistance. Muscle tissue is the largest glucose storage site in your body. When your muscles contract during exercise, they pull glucose out of your bloodstream without even needing insulin. That is partly why a simple walk after a meal lowers blood sugar so effectively. But beyond the immediate effect, having more muscle mass fundamentally changes how your body handles glucose over the long term. More muscle means more storage capacity and more insulin sensitivity even when you are not exercising. You do not need to become an athlete to see these benefits. Just 2 or 3 sessions per week of basic resistance training is enough to start shifting things. Lifting weights, resistance bands, bodyweight exercises like squats or push-ups. These all work. What matters most is consistency and gradually making the effort a little harder over time. Number 2 is reducing glucose spikes, not necessarily eliminating carbohydrates altogether. There is a persistent idea that all carbs are the enemy if you have insulin resistance. But that is not how the body works. The trouble starts when glucose floods your bloodstream too quickly. That is when you get the sharp spike. That is when insulin has to surge to compensate. The goal is not to avoid carbs. It is to avoid rapid, massive rises in blood glucose. Choose sources that release glucose more slowly, keep portions reasonable, and combine them with other foods that slow digestion. A gentle rise in glucose is manageable. A sharp vertical spike is metabolically expensive and drives insulin resistance over time. Number 3 is about liquid calories. This is one of the fastest ways to worsen insulin resistance without realizing it. Fruit juice, smoothies, sugary coffee drinks, energy drinks, and even things that seem healthy like bottled coconut water can deliver a surge of glucose at alarming speed. When you drink sugar, there is no fiber, no chewing, nothing slowing it down. It gets absorbed almost immediately, creating one of the sharpest blood sugar spikes possible. Even fruit smoothies can be a problem. Blending breaks down the fiber structure and makes the natural sugars far more available. You take in much more sugar at once than you would eating the same fruit whole, and your pancreas has to respond aggressively. The insulin surge that follows often drops blood sugar too far, leaving you tired and hungry again an hour later. That cycle of spike and crash is one of the most damaging patterns for metabolic health. Number 4 is pairing carbohydrates with protein and fat at every meal. When you eat carbs alone, glucose enters your bloodstream in one concentrated wave. But when you add protein or fat, digestion slows and glucose is released much more gradually. This does not mean every meal has to be complicated. Toast with eggs or peanut butter, rice with chicken and vegetables, fruit with a handful of nuts, or a little plain yogurt. These small combinations make a meaningful difference in how your body responds, and they keep you full longer, naturally reducing the urge to snack. Number 5 is stopping the habit of constant snacking. We have been told for years that eating small, frequent meals keeps your metabolism active. But every time you eat, even a small snack, your pancreas releases insulin. If you are eating every 2 or 3 hours, insulin never falls back to baseline, it stays elevated. And that prolonged elevation is one of the core drivers of insulin resistance. Your body needs time when insulin is low. That is when fat can be used for energy. That is when cells can reset their sensitivity. Create clear gaps between meals. Allow yourself to get genuinely hungry before eating again. It feels unfamiliar at first if you are used to grazing, but within a few days, your body adjusts. Number 6 is managing chronic stress. This one gets overlooked more than almost anything else in conversations about blood sugar. Stress directly raises your blood glucose. When you are stressed, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline, signaling your liver to release stored glucose into your bloodstream. Useful in a genuine emergency. But if you are chronically stressed, sitting at a desk or lying awake worrying, that glucose has nowhere to go. It just sits in your blood and insulin has to deal with it. Over time, chronic stress becomes a hidden source of insulin resistance completely separate from what you eat. You could follow a perfect diet and still struggle with elevated blood sugar if stress hormones are constantly elevated. Managing stress is not a luxury. It is a core part of metabolic health. Meditation, prayer, time in nature, protecting space for rest, setting boundaries on what drains you. Whatever works for you has to be regular. Number 7 is changing the order in which you eat your food. This seems almost too simple to matter until you look at the research. Eat fiber first, then protein and fat, then carbohydrates last. Fiber from vegetables forms a kind of physical mesh in your stomach and small intestine that slows the absorption of everything that follows. Start your meal with a salad or cooked vegetables, move to your protein, then finish with your carbs. Studies have shown reductions in post-meal blood sugar of up to 40% from changing the order alone, without changing the food itself. A practical way to do this is to cut up some raw vegetables while the main meal is cooking. Carrots, celery, cucumber with a bit of hummus. It loads you with fiber, protein and fat right at the start and turns that waiting time into something genuinely useful. Number 8 is prioritizing sleep. Poor sleep is one of the fastest ways to damage your insulin sensitivity, and it happens almost immediately. Even a single night of short or disrupted sleep can impair your ability to handle glucose the next day. Your cells become less responsive to insulin. Your appetite hormones get thrown off and you start craving high sugar, high fat foods to compensate. Do that repeatedly over weeks or months and you have created a real metabolic problem. Going to bed and waking at roughly the same time every day helps regulate your body's internal clock, which in turn regulates insulin sensitivity. 7 to 9 hours of sleep in a dark, cool room without screens before bed is not just about feeling rested, it is about protecting your metabolism. Number 9 is avoiding what we might call naked sugars. That is any sugary food eaten on its own without anything to slow it down. A cookie by itself, a handful of candy, a pastry on an empty stomach. These create some of the largest, most rapid blood sugar spikes possible because there is nothing to buffer the sugar. The solution is not necessarily to never enjoy those foods, it is to never eat them alone. Have something sweet at the end of a meal where you have already eaten protein, fat, and fiber. The sugar gets absorbed as part of a mixed meal. The spike is smaller, the insulin response is gentler. Number 10 is measuring insulin directly, not just blood sugar. Most people with prediabetes only ever have their blood glucose tested, but glucose is a late marker. By the time it is elevated, you have already had years of high insulin working overtime. Insulin rises first, sometimes a full decade before blood sugar becomes abnormal. If you really want to catch insulin resistance early, ask your doctor about a fasting insulin test. In the United States, you ideally want fasting insulin below 5 and certainly below 7. If your number is higher than that, even if your blood sugar and your A1C are still normal, you are already insulin resistant. Catching this early gives you real time to reverse it before it turns into something more serious. Number 11 is reducing ultra-processed foods, and this goes well beyond just cutting sugar. Ultra-processed foods are industrially manufactured with ingredients you would never find in a home kitchen. Emulsifiers, stabilizers, artificial flavors, preservatives. They break down so fast they deliver glucose almost instantly, with no fiber and nothing to slow digestion. There is also growing evidence that some additives may disrupt beneficial gut bacteria and interfere with metabolic signaling. A simple rule: if a food comes in a package with more than 5 ingredients, or if most of those ingredients are things you do not recognize, it is probably ultra-processed. Stick to whole foods as much as possible. If it did not exist 100 years ago, it is probably not doing your metabolism any favors. Number 12 is moving after meals. You do not need anything intense. A 10 to 15 minute walk is genuinely enough. When your muscles contract during movement, they take up glucose from your bloodstream without needing insulin. This is especially powerful right after eating, when glucose is entering your blood most rapidly. A walk within 30 minutes of finishing a meal will noticeably blunt the blood sugar spike. Do this consistently and you train your muscles to handle glucose more efficiently even at rest. It costs nothing and the benefits compound quietly over time. Number 13 is aligning your eating with your body's natural daily rhythm. Your ability to handle glucose is not constant. Your internal clock makes you most insulin sensitive in the morning and least sensitive at night. The exact same meal eaten at 8 in the morning causes a smaller blood sugar response than that same meal eaten at 10 at night. Eating late, especially carbohydrates late in the evening, is metabolically expensive. The most practical shift is to front-load your eating earlier in the day. A real breakfast, a solid lunch, a lighter and earlier dinner. Try to finish eating at least 2 to 3 hours before bed. This gives your body time to process the meal while insulin sensitivity is still relatively high, and it almost always improves sleep quality as well. Number 14 is getting the right lab tests, so you have a clear picture of where you actually stand. A normal A1C is generally considered below 5.7%. But ideally, you want it closer to 5.4 or lower. Risk rises gradually. It does not suddenly begin at the cutoff number. Also look at your triglycerides and HDL cholesterol together. If triglycerides are high and HDL is low, that is a strong signal of insulin resistance, even if blood sugar still looks normal. As a rough guide in the US, a triglyceride to HDL ratio above 3 suggests insulin resistance, while below 2 is much healthier territory. Ask for your A1C, ask about fasting insulin, and ask for a full lipid panel. Look at the overall pattern rather than a single number. Catching insulin resistance years before it becomes diabetes or heart disease gives you a real window to turn things around. Number 15 is creating longer daily periods when insulin stays low. Every time you eat, insulin goes up. If you eat constantly, it never comes back down. Simply finishing dinner at a reasonable hour and not eating again until you are genuinely hungry in the morning gives insulin several hours to fall back to baseline. That is when your cells can begin resetting their sensitivity. That is also when your body shifts toward burning stored fat, because elevated insulin actively blocks fat metabolism. You do not need long fasts or skipped meals. Just stop eating after dinner and do not start again until real hunger arrives in the morning. Many people find that once this becomes a habit, they feel better and sleep more soundly too. Number 16 is being honest about alcohol. Alcohol disrupts blood sugar regulation in multiple ways. It interferes with your liver's ability to release glucose, which can cause reactive low blood sugar. It promotes fat accumulation around your internal organs, the kind most strongly linked to insulin resistance. And it disrupts sleep, which immediately impairs insulin sensitivity the next day. Even moderate drinking, a glass or two of wine several evenings a week, can slow or stall progress if you are actively trying to reverse insulin resistance. That does not mean a drink can never happen, but being honest about how much and how often matters. For some people, stepping back from alcohol for a few months is what finally allows other changes to take hold. Number 17 is prioritizing fiber at every meal. Fiber, particularly soluble fiber from vegetables, beans, oats, and certain fruits, slows digestion and blunts glucose absorption. It also feeds beneficial gut bacteria that produce compounds which improve insulin sensitivity. Most Americans get around 15 to 20 grams of fiber per day when the target should be closer to 30. Include vegetables at every meal, not just dinner. Add spinach to your eggs, have a simple salad with lunch. Snack on carrots, a handful of nuts, or some berries rather than crackers. The more consistently you do it, the more naturally it becomes part of your routine. Number 18 is focusing on reducing visceral fat, not just the number on the scale. Visceral fat is the fat stored around your internal organs, especially in the abdominal area. It releases inflammatory signals and hormones that directly drive insulin resistance. You can be at a perfectly normal weight and still carry dangerous levels of visceral fat if you are inactive or eating poorly. Waist circumference is a far better indicator than overall weight. For men, a waist over 37 inches is worth paying attention to, and over 40 is a stronger warning sign. For women, the concern begins around 31.5 inches, with over 34.5 being more significant. If your waist measurement is going down, even if your weight is not changing dramatically, you are losing visceral fat, and that is what matters most for reversing insulin resistance. Number 19 is keeping medication in the right perspective. Medications like metformin or GLP-1 drugs can absolutely help manage blood sugar and reduce complications. They are real and useful tools, but they do not fix the underlying problem. They manage the symptoms. Metformin helps cells respond better to insulin. GLP-1 drugs slow digestion and reduce appetite. But neither one reverses the root cause, which is chronic metabolic overload from poor diet, inactivity, stress, and disrupted sleep. If you are on medication, that is fine. Your doctor has good reasons for prescribing it, but the goal over time should be to need less of it, not more. Medication should support the fundamentals, not replace them. And number 20, the final one, is choosing consistency over perfection. Insulin resistance does not develop overnight. And it does not reverse overnight either. It builds over years and takes sustained effort over months to turn around. But that effort does not have to be flawless. You do not need to follow every strategy on this list without ever slipping up. What matters is picking a few things that feel manageable and doing them consistently. Walk after meals most days. Sleep well most nights. Choose whole foods more often than not. Over weeks and months, your energy will stabilize. Your body composition will gradually shift. Your long-term risk of diabetes, heart disease, and all the complications that come with insulin resistance will fall meaningfully. The habits you practice today are the ones that determine what life looks and feels like 10 or 20 years from now. Whether those years are spent active, clear-headed, and independent, or managing one preventable condition after another. Every small daily choice is quietly adding up in one direction or the other. If this gave you even one thing worth trying, share this video with someone you care about. They may be dealing with this silently and not even realize it yet. And leave a comment below telling us where you are watching from. It means a great deal to know who we are reaching and where this information is making a difference.